Recording in
All right, we have our system here. All right, we want to start up with our case. We are taking new. Then we go to material balance. Go to our option. We have our oil reservoir. Our tank model, we have our reservoir, just a single tank. I already explained this. Then we go to our PVT. We are going to input our PVT data, but we will not do PVT matching. I already gave you data for PVT matching. You can use that. Okay. Cancel this. I reduce this. Open the Excel so that we can be looking at it here. Okay. So our gas oil ratio here is 800. Oil gravity 88. Gas gravity 0.9. Water salinity 150,000. And no contaminant 0, 0, 0. All right. So I've already explained in the last video that if you have your PVT data and you want to do your PVT matching, you click here on matching, you input the data that you have, you put the temperature, you put your bubble point, then you go now to match. Once you go to match, you do the calculation, and then you can see the match parameters to see which correlation is the best. So from here, we'll just leave it simple without matching. So we have done with PVT data. We go now to tank data. Shift this at this corner. All right, so our tank data, we'll just call this reservoir. We'll just call this reservoir 1. That's our reservoir 1. Our temperature there. All right. So we have, I will just play on some of these parameters. I will not put exactly the same values. I'll put 210 here. Initial pressure, I'll put 5,500. Porosity, 0.20. Fluid water saturation, 0.15. Our correlation here, we have our water compressibility, we use correlation. But if there is a value for water compressibility, you can always put that. Gas cap, we'll put it as 0. I said initially, they must have calculated the amount of hydrocarbon from volumetric analysis. That means they must have calculated the area of the reservoir using seismic. They must have determined the porosity and water saturation using well logs, which we did under deadlock, analyzing our well logs to obtain the porosity and the water saturation. Okay, so here initially they must have determined something. We can just put 220. And then at the start of our production, we have 0102 2000. 0102 2000. We'll go now to the next. Okay, so from there we take next. Our water influx, I explained it well the other day. So we may, since I explained the Carter Tracy, we may just use a Carter Tracy model. I think I have the parameters here for Carter Tracy. All right, so our reservoir thickness 100, reservoir radius 7,000. I'll say I'll play with the values a little bit. Okay, our outer and inner radius, we think we consider the reservoir as a radial reservoir. We have, this is our well. This is our reservoir, oil reservoir. Then we have a water body that is surrounding that particular reservoir. We have our well at the center that has been drilled at the center here. That's where the well penetrates. We have the radius of the reservoir, and then we have the radius of the aquifer. So the outer slash inner radius is the radius of the aquifer from the well divided by the radius of the reservoir. That's what we call the outer slash the inner radius. Then we have the encroachment angle. If the aquifer surrounds the entire reservoir, then the encroachment angle will be 360 degrees. But we may still have a situation where we have our reservoir, but the water is not in all the directions. We may have a situation like that. So this angle now is called our encroachment angle. But if it surrounds everything, then it should be 360 degrees. So in this case, we assume values. We may use values that, because analyzing the aquifer is one of the most complex things when it comes to petroleum engineering. Very, very complex. So in this particular case, we will just use 180 for now. Let's leave 180 for now. Then our aquifer permeability, we'll use 35. I just want to treat with these values a little bit. Then we go now to our raw compressibility. We'll use it as default. We'll have our raw compaction. We leave it like that. We have values for raw compaction. Then we may go to enable model. Once you click on enable model, these parameters now will need to be added. And then we'll go to pour. All right, this pour volume is not highlighting. I think the next example will use this pour volume. This pour volume is coming in when you need to monitor the water contact, the water oil contact, to see how it is migrating during production. We'll need the data for pour volume and versus depth to be able to do that. Once you click on that option, this particular parameter will be highlighted, but for now, we'll keep it simple. So the next example will probably do something on that. All right, so the next now is relative permeability, which I already talked about the other day. Where is the data for that? Okay, this is it here, our relative permeability data. I already talked about this formula the other day. So we just click here and we paste, and we have that. Then we go now to our production. This is our production data. Don't mind the date in this format. The date is there. Once you click it here, you can see it up here. You can see it up there. Don't mind what is appearing there like that. So once we copy it, we go to our software, we click and we paste. You see the date now is coming out clearly. All right, so from there now, our production ends in 2005. Click validate. We'll click validate. Then from there, we can observe the production data. You can go to plot, you look at the production history of that particular area. But that is not our concern for now. All right, we have, okay, they say they call it water. All right, no problem. You take, okay, there. What message they have given is in this particular situation. If you look at what we put at the beginning, this is our corned water. Corned water saturation is 0.15. But when you come to relative permeability, if this residual saturation is the same as corned water, if it's not 0.15, then that error message would come up. Once you click OK, the 0.15 will come here. So there is no issue with that. So we click with that. We go now to our matching. I explained already, we have two types of matching. We have the analytical matching and graphical matching. So we'll start with analytical. If we look at what we have here, the model does not match. This is our production data. And then we have with aquifer influx. This is what we have with aquifer influx. And then the one with red is what we have without aquifer. So this is our model that the system have generated. So the system have generated this particular model, but this particular model does not match with our production data. So our interest now is to see how we can tweak this particular model to match with this production data. This model is generated based on all the properties that we have inputted, the permeability, the aquifer properties, the tank properties, and all of that. All of that now gives us this generated parameter. But we will come now to regression because we want to regress on this. We want to see how we can do regression on one or two parameters that we don't trust that much so that we can now adjust this model in such a way that it matches precisely with this production data. So we come to our regression analysis. These are the various parameters that we have inputted. We will choose some few parameters that probably we don't trust. I may put oil in place, and I will say, okay, let this oil in place. We may have probably some limits that we may want to work within, or the limits have shown that in this particular area, there is no way oil in place. There is no way the initial oil in place can be more than this value. So we'll put this value there for our upper limit, that's the maximum. No matter how it is regressing on this value, let it not be greater than this. We'll go to reservoir radius, we'll put 12,000 for maximum. Encroachment angle, we'll leave it to just work on it like that. And then we can also look at the reservoir thickness. We'll put 150. All right, let's work with this first. So what I'll do now is I'll click on calculate. The system now will do some analysis on this. And then will tell me some values that they propose. Okay, here. I changed those parameters at the beginning because I wanted a solution that will not really match so that we see how we do the analytical history matching. So if it doesn't end up matching at the end of the day that much, there is still no problem. Remember that I changed the parameter so that I'll have something that will really not match at all so that we see how we can do this analysis. I will look at this reservoir thickness. I'll look at this value and say it is probably very small. So I will not accept that value first. I will leave it first and see what will happen. All right, now I will go now to done. Calculate. Okay, it has not really changed that much. I will now add these two parameters there. Then here I'll give a limit. Let the limit not be less than 75. 75, I will calculate. Right, it has given me something. I accept all what it has given me. Let me see. No, the porosity and permeability, they are too small. I'll put here 0.15. Then here 35, I'll put let's say 20. Then I'll recalculate again. All right, then I will accept all feeds. Then I will take OK. So we see how it is gradually pushing towards this value. This model is gradually pushing towards this particular history data, but it is still not okay. I will still do regression again. I will calculate another set of parameters. I accept all fits. Then I take OK. So you see, it is actually moving as you're doing the regression. So you actually have to regress again. I may increase this value to 350, this upper limit to 350. This value, yes, it's okay. This one, not less than that. All right, let me do calculate again. See what we have. Accept. All right, so it is not longer changing. It's no longer changing. So I'll add encroachment angle to it and do a regression to that and see, calculate. That's the encroachment angle that they have proposed. I accept and push. So you see how it is actually moving. So all of this now is what we call analytical history matching. You are trying to match the model to your production data that you have. So you have to start doing simulation, but you don't just go and start changing things anyhow. You have to know what can be the likelihood maximum or what can be the likelihood minimum and all of that before you can work with, before you can do some kind of regression here. Because if you look at what we have here, the system has not given us any regression on this parameter. That shows that it has done the best regression that it can do for this particular parameter. That's the best regression that we can do for this particular parameter. I may also add maybe our outer angle there. Then I will put a limit of, let's say, 4. I put a maximum of, let's say, 10. I calculate. I see what I have. I accept all the feeds. And then done. You see that it doesn't change that much. So there are actually some systems that you just find it very difficult to have a history match. But not this particular case. This case, you can have a good history match if you use exactly the data that we have. I just tweak it so that we will have a case that is difficult to match, so that you actually see the difficulties that you have to go through in order to obtain analytical match. I do not want to give a situation where we just click at once and then it gives a history match and then you feel that it is that easy. No. So it is something very complicated that you have to really actually follow. But if you put the parameters that I gave, the exact parameters that we have here, if you carry out the history match, I think just about 2 or 3 regression, you should be able to have a good match. So we'll leave it at this level. We will not continue with that. And then you come now to a graphical method. The graphical method is more or less to confirm what you have in the analytical method. So we'll come here now. There are different methods. Remember when I explained the material balance, even though I didn't give all the methods, but I give one method where we have a simplified method, a simplified formula for the material balance equation, and we use that in Excel and we did some calculations in Excel. So if I come to up here, I'll look at methods. When I click on method, I see the different types of plots that I can plot for this material balance equation. We have the Havlenal and Odell, which I talked about it. That is it. We see that it is not really actually matching that much because this is where our line is. We come to the second method. You look at it, still not really matching. All of it must not match. We have about 1 or 2 that matches. It's okay. This, we don't have a line here. So what I may do now, I look at best fit. You can click on best fit. There are some situations where you click on best fit, then the calculation will show that the initial oil in place is 0. So the system will no longer do any calculation again. You need to go back If that is the case, you need to come back to this tang parameter, then you now input back another value here. If you take best feed line and it gives you 0, it will not continue. So you have to come back and re-put this value here before it can continue. So I'll go to graphical method. Maybe this one, I can take the best feed line. The best feed line is going horizontal, which is not okay with us. I will use another method. Maybe this. I take the best feed line. You can still arrange the line for you to give your test. You can still arrange the line. Because from the line, you actually see the oil initially in place here. You actually see the value of the oil initially in place. If we cannot arrange this one further, we'll take another. All right, this one, I can arrange it like that because it has both ends. I arrange it like that. Okay, now this is what is happening after the arrangement. Look at the oil initially in place. The oil in place is 0, which is practically not possible. Why? Because you look at this line, it is now going already below 0. So it shows that this line cannot be used to do the graphical method. Cannot be used to do our graphical method. That's the more reason why you have the value that was around this particular area up there. So I will leave that one. Let me see which one is the best. You see, this is exactly what I was talking about. The initial oil in place in the tank reservoir is less than or equal to 0. So once this points out, you realize that everything can no longer work. You come now to our tank model. You see that it is now 0. I will put back the value that I had. It was approximately very close to 160. I will take down. I will go back there. And then you see now the curve comes back. So you have to choose the best curve. Let me see which one I can use for this case. This one probably may go, but it will still lie below 0. Because if you look at what we have here, 160, that's exactly where 160 is. That's exactly where 160 is. It means that wherever it cuts this y-axis, that is where our initial oil in place lies. That's where our initial oil in place lies. This one is still going below 0. So this data is probably not suited for graphical matching. Because even if I this line here, you look at it well, you realize that it is going to give us something below 0. So the data is not appropriate for graphical matching. The data is not appropriate for graphical matching. If I take best fit line here, all right, it's not appropriate. I will not take that. I will go back to the value, close to the value that I had. All right. You realize that once you're changing this parameter here, what you did for analytical method also is changing. If I change any parameter there, this line will change. So you might actually see a best match here. Then you go now to graphical method and then you change parameters in the graphical method by maybe choosing a best fit line. Then you come back to the analytical method, you realize that it is no longer matching. You come back to the analytical method, it's no longer matching. Remember, I said it is not matching in this case because I changed the value. If you use what we have, you are actually going to see a match. So this is the process of matching, which basically is more of analytical than graphical. Graphical, once you obtain a good match here, you're going to the graphical method to confirm your results. 1 or 2 plots there will have a good match. We are not having a good match in 1 or 2 plots because basically we are not even having a good match here for analytical method. So try it with the exact data that we have in the Excel, which I'm going to input. Now, what we will do now is if we have a good match, we will now go now to the same history matching and we go to run simulation. I've already explained me? Hello? Okay. So tell us principally what is the main energy source of that particular reservoir? What's the main energy source of that particular reservoir? So we'll click here, we'll go now to history match and we'll take run simulation. So what we are going to do here now is we are going to calculate our simulated data. Since we have done our history match, we can run the simulation, we calculate, it now calculates, and then it ends there. All right. One advantage of history match and simulation is that it calculates even parameters that our history plots could not give us. So if I go to our history plot, I go to our input, I come to our history plot, you realize that we have only reservoir pressure, cumulative oil produced, cumulative gas produced, and cumulative water produced. These are all of the parameters that we have for our history. But if I go to our simulation, there are so many parameters that our simulations have calculated. We have average oil rate, we have our recovery factor, we have our average water rate, average liquid rate. It has also calculated the oil saturation. It has calculated the water saturation, the oil formation volume factor, the gas formation volume factor, and so many other parameters that our simulation have calculated for the past event. Remember, we are still calculating what the data is during the production. So we are still based during that production. We are not going to forecast. This is not yet forecasting. So if I go now to plot, this is my plot. You can plot two things. I can plot the history and I can plot the simulation. For the history, let me take the tank pressure. That is the tank pressure for our history data. I will go now to our simulation. I will take tank pressure again. Now, look at what is happening. Our history tank pressure and our simulation tank pressure is not matching because we do not have a good analytical match. Once you have a good analytical match, this is where you come to confirm that what we have as our production data is exactly what the simulation is telling us. So the simulation is giving us some kind of difference because under analytical method, we did not have a perfect match because I changed the parameters. So this is exactly the effects of all of that. Now, let me see. Let's go back. I will redo this. I'll come back to these tank parameters. I'll come here. Let me reuse the exact values that we had. All right, here we have 250. We have 250 for temperature. Initial pressure is 5,215. 5,215. Our porosity is 0.23. 0.23. Our corner water saturation is okay. This value is 250. Is 250. All right, that one is okay. We come under water influx. What data do we have there? We have 100. We have 100 there. Here we have 6,620. Here we have 5. Then here we have encroachment angle is 142. 142. Then our aquifer is 30. Is 30. All right. Let's see. Thus, we come now to our analytical method. You see that it is already even closely matching, even without us doing regression. That was the reason why I decided to tweak the parameter so that you see how complicated it is to do analytical analytical history matching. So you see that the data is already having close to a match, even without any regression. So if I come now to regression, I will regress. I'll leave this outer boundary. I'll leave porosity and permeability. Let's just regress on this and see. We regress. Oh, what did I pick? What did I? All right. So we calculate. then we take accept all it, and then we see this. So you see, that's perfect. It's already giving us a good match. It's giving us a good match now. So if I close this and I go back to run simulation and I recalculate the simulation, if I go now to my plot, that is already my history that all is already matching. So we see history tank pressure and then simulation tank pressure. This is a perfect match. We show that our simulation is good enough because we have a good, we are having seen how the parameters are already matching. So once you have a good history match, when you run the simulation, you realize that the data also, they are going to match. So you have to always come to this plot to test your history matching to see if you have a good history match. So I've already done one exercise for you, which was supposed to be an assignment, but it's okay. I wanted a situation that we have a good situation so that you understand exactly what we are talking about. So there are other parameters that have been calculated also. If I can look at for history, these are the only parameters that I have. But if I come for simulation, you see so many other parameters that have been calculated. So that is one advantage of simulation, of doing a history match. A history match predicts other properties of the reservoirs that our production history was unable to predict. So it gives us a whole lot of properties about the reservoir. So there are other things that you can plot. We can remove this plot, remove all of it. We come to simulation. You can plot our recovery factor to see what the recovery factor will be, how the recovery factor is changing as time is changing, as time is changing. All right, so that's what we have for our simulation. That's what we have for our simulation. So I'll now want to do some kind of quick prediction. I'm going to do a prediction without a well model. Remember, for us to do our prediction, we need a well model. But let's just assume that if we don't have a well model, we don't have our nodal analysis, how can we do a quick prediction? So I'll come to my production setup. There are so many information that they are asking. First, they are asking us to predict. What type of prediction do we have? Profile from production schedule, no well. Profile, production profile using well model. So we will first of all start with no well model to make it simple. Then what other things are supposed to be added? Do we have a gas lift? Do we have water injection? We have gas injection and all of that. How do you want to do your prediction? Is it at the start of production or at the end of production? We want it to start from the end of production onwards. So that from where we stopped our production, we can predict what will happen in the future. Where do you want it to end? Do you have a particular date that you want it to end, or you just want it to be automatic? We are going to leave it as automatic. So we'll take done. We come now here. We have our production constraints. Is there any constraint you want to add? We may just say at the end of our production, that's the end date of our production, 01/07/2005. Let's just say our oil rate is 3,000. That's the only constraint that we may have. We take validate. Okay. Remember, we have no well model, so there will be no need to define all of this. We go to our reporting. How do you want it to report? Do you want it to report every after 1 month, every after 2 months, or every after 3 months, and so on? But we'll always leave it as automatic. Let's just leave it like that. Then we come now to our run prediction, and we calculate our prediction. So it now calculates. This is the prediction now. It may predict till when the reservoir pressure ends to 0 if you give no limit of date. If you give a particular date limit, it's going to end. But if you don't give, it will predict right up to the point where the reservoir pressure has reduced to a point where it can no longer produce naturally. So it has now done our prediction. So I'll come to my plot. I have my history and prediction. Let's forget about simulation for now. I'll look at my tank pressure. That's my tank pressure. I'll go to my prediction. I'll still look at tank pressure. If you look at keenly, there's a big difference between the two plots. Our history ends here. This is dark in color. Then this is red in color. So our history is ending here. Then from 2005, this is what our prediction is giving us, right up to where the reservoir pressure goes below 2,500. We may look at another property also for history. We may look at cumulative oil production. That's our cumulative oil production. We go to prediction. We look at cumulative oil production also. All right, so that's what we have. So if you look at what we have here, this is green in color, which shows that this is where our history ends, then this is our production. We may also want to look at maybe our recovery factor. To look at our recovery factor. Okay, oil recovery factor. All right, the plot is already saturated. We could remove everything. We look at our recovery factor. That's our recovery factor. We may also look at the simulation because there is no recovery factor for history, but the simulated data did us a calculation of recovery factor. We may also put that. So you see that this is the recovery factor within the period of history production, and then this is our recovery factor. But if you did not do a good history match, you will not have these two matching together. If our simulation was not matching, then you will not have these two matching together. But generally, to do a good prediction, it's always good to give a particular time frame, maybe from 2005 to 2015. That is when you actually have a good prediction. All right, let me look at the time. All right, so we still have another time. Maybe we still have enough time. Maybe we run another simulation again. We may have this. We have our file. We may want to save this. We may just go to new.
I've just come.
Someone is talking. Okay. So we'll go now. Go to new. They'll ask you if you want to save this data. You may just take yes. You take yes and you save it anywhere. So I'll just put it as day 2, MBAL day 2, whatsoever you want to put, you save. It saves, and then we can now start a new project. We go to material balance. We go to our option. We are working with oil. We go to PVT. We have our fluid properties. Let me close this first. And then I reduce the size so that we may be seeing our Excel. I have another data here for prediction. All right, so we go to fluid properties, which we have already done that PVT. All right, so for our PVT, our formation gas oil ratio is 650. We have here 40. We have here 0.6. We have here 0.6. We have here 2,000. We have 2,000. Then here we have 0. We have 0. And then we have another 0 there. All right. You can also do PVT matching if there's a PVT data. This is our PVT data. You use it. I don't know if it's what I gave you the other day. You can use it to do your PVT matching. I'll click OK. I'll go to my data. I'll put my tank parameters. Where are the tank parameters? All right, so I have a reservoir. The temperature is 210. Initial pressure 6,000. Porosity 0.25. Cooling water 0.23. Then gas cap is 0. Original, we have 150. Start of production 01, 01, 2000. All right, I move to next. Water influx. I hope there should be a data there. Okay, this is our water influx. In this case, we may use a different model. We may use the horse van model. We must not use Kata Tracy. We have 100 there. We have 13,445. We have four there. Let's leave it like that. And then here we may have 100. And then for compressibility, we'll leave it as default. Move to next. And then we have this. Hope I have the data there for that. Okay. All right, this is what I have. I'll copy it. I'll put it here, paste. I go to next, production history now. We must not have production history. All right, so, okay, this is a case where I wanted to show us what we may do in a situation where there's no production history. Maybe they have started a new field, and then from that new field, oh, what happened with this data? And then they want to predict how the performance will be in that particular new field. They want to predict what the performance will be in that particular new field. There is no data production history in that particular area. So we will validate. And then for production, we'll just leave it like that. There's no production history. So we'll take done. Okay. Then I'll go now. There is no need now. If you come here, there is no history matching because you don't have any production history. So there's no history matching. I'll go straight to our production. I want to do a production in this case where there is a well model. So I'll include a well model. Start of production, there's no problem because there's even no production data, so you can leave it like that. We take OK. We go to our production constraint. We may have some production constraint there. Maybe at the start of that production, when is our production starting? I want to check where our production is starting. Okay, the 1st of January 2020. Oh, let's just assume that it's a new field. Maybe 2023. 1st of January 2023. Production constraint. Maybe from the 1st of that January at the start of that production. 01/2023. Our wellhead pressure, let's say 200 psi. Our wellhead pressure is 200 psi. We may have a minimum oil rate that we don't want to produce, and we may have a maximum oil rate. Let's just first of all work with it like this and see how it goes. And then we have this. And then we have our well type definition now. Okay, we go to our well type definition. We have to add a well to it. So there are two ways that you can do it. If you come here, you can see add well. Once I click on it and hold, I've already started the process. There's no problem. If I come here and I click on this plus, once I click on this plus, a new well is added. When I input all the parameters, because we are seeing here well 01. At the beginning, if you want to add a well, you can come to add well, click and add it there, you add. But since we have already started, what type of well do we have? It's an oil producer. It may be a gas, a water injector, or a gas injector if we want to analyze the performance of water flooding. But we'll go to next. we have our inflow performance. Our inflow performance, we have a straight line plus Vogel. That's okay because before the bubble point is a straight line, and after the bubble point, the Vogel equation comes in. We have our productivity index. You must have done this calculation in Prosper. So I may have 1.25 or 24. All right, we may also have some validate. I'll come here. This is my plot. I will look at the plot. That is my inflow performance relation. That's my inflow performance relation. We may have some data that we have. We come to calculate. We have some pre-data that we have. Or they must have done some kind of a well testing first. So let's just say at 2,500 bottom hole flowing pressure or tank pressure, we have a manifold pressure, that's wellhead pressure of, let's say, 300 psi. Our water cut is 0, and our gas oil ratio is, let's say, 400. Once you click on this, it calculates our flowing bottom hole pressure. That means it generates our IPR, not IPR, sorry, our VLP. That gives us the performance of the well ball. But in this case, it will not be accurate, it will be wrong, because if I come to plot here, I see it as 0. There is no problem. We'll leave it at that 0. We'll leave it at that 0, then we'll adjust it. So it has calculated our liquid rate at a flowing bottom hole pressure of 0. So I will take OK. I'll take next. You may have some other issues that you want to input into your inflow performance. Maybe there is water oil ratio. What do you have? You can put it. Gas oil ratio, you can put it. Gas saturation, water saturation. There are other things you can just put to improve our IPR. I will go now to our VLP, which is our tubing performance relation. This is where we can arrange the plot to get our accurate VLP, vertical lift performance. That gives us the performance of the well ball. It could be very complicated. So there are two methods here. No, yeah. There are two methods here. We have tubing performance relation, but if you want to keep it simple, we may take the constant bottom hole flowing pressure. But the right way is for our tubing performance relation. Once you take tubing performance relation, you come to edit. All of these parameters, once we generated our nodal analysis in Excel, we had this data at the end of the day. That was the result, a set of data that we had in our different columns. So you can copy all of those data and paste it here, because we had our wellhead pressure, we had our water cut, the gas oil ratio, our liquid rate, and our bottom hole fluid pressure. You can copy all of that data and put it here. Then it will give us the best accurate vertical lift performance. But in this case, we don't want to complicate it. But once you're doing it at your own leisure time, look at the data that we did in Prosper, come and input it here. It will give us a good data. But here we are just going to make it simple by taking constant bottom hole flowing pressure. So we just assume that it may be flowing at the bottom, constant bottom hole flowing pressure of 2,100 psi. Once you do that, this is now your plot. This is now your IPR, and then this is, you look at that, it is a straight line, because you have said you want to work with a constant bottom hole flowing pressure, which is never the situation in real life. We are just keeping it simple. So once I take on done, if I come back to this plot, if I go to calculate, you now see this value of 0 here has changed. If I go now to plot, I now see what is happening. This is my nodal analysis now. This is my well performance, which the system is going to use to predict the performance of that particular well. So I take done. I go now to well scheduling. We are starting our production from the 1st of January 2023. We may not have an end date. If you want to predict a particular end date, you can put it. How many wells do you have? We may just have one well in this case. What is the well? We have our well 01, which we have developed the model for it, which we have developed the nodal analysis for it. So we will leave it like that, and then we take done. We go now to our reporting. How do we want it to report? We will just take done there. We just always take done. Then we go now to our run prediction, and then we calculate. It might take a very long time, especially for a situation where you do not give a date limit. It will calculate to the point where the reservoir cannot longer function naturally. So we will have this. But you have to always know that the company must not always produce right up to this date with this particular prediction that we have, because the company might keep changing the flow rate at any given point in time. They may not want to produce at the flow rates that the system is predicting, but they want to produce at a higher flow rate. So what they will do now is, once you change that, all of these parameter changes. So all of this production that we may have done for 100 years, you may do it for 10 years or 5 years. So I'll go now to my plot. Remember, we don't have any history because there was no history. So there was no simulation. So we are going to prediction straight. We look at our oil rate. So we look at how the oil rate will gradually vary. We may also look at the recovery factor. We look at how the recovery factor is going to vary. So that is our new well that has no production history. We are trying to predict to see look at how the production history will be like in the nearest future. All right. So there are so many other things that you can plot, so many other things that our system, oil saturation, water saturation, we look at the water saturation and all of that. All right. Let me now let me come here under our tank data. I want to monitor contacts, monitor the oil water contacts or the gas oil contact. Once I click on this, you now realize that the pore volume versus depth now becomes in red, which means that you need the parameter. I'll go to next. I'll go to next. I need this parameter. I'm sure, okay, this is it. I'll copy this parameter now. This is the parameter that the system needs in order to monitor that contact. I'll click on paste. I'll take OK. I'll come now to my prediction again. I'll recalculate because I've changed a parameter there. I'll recalculate. Right. I'll go now to my plot. I'll take this off. Prediction, I may look at the contacts. Okay, oil water contact. That's oil water contact. So that's just to tell you that at the beginning, the oil water contact was at 11,800 feet. But as you're doing production, the water is gradually infiltrating into the oil zone because you are gradually removing oil from the reservoir. So the oil water level now, the water is gradually rising because you are removing oil from the reservoir. So probably by 2027, our oil water contact will probably be around 11,300 feet. Let us say approximately 11,300 feet. So it has actually moved from 11,800 feet to about 11,300 feet. Remember that the oil water contact is measured from the surface of the earth. That's why you have that depth, that deep like that. We are not saying that the reservoir is about 11,000 feet. That's practically impossible. You have a reservoir of about 11,000 feet, then that company should be the richest company in the world. In fact, that company should be richer than any government in the world. There's no way you can have a reservoir of 11,800 feet. So this measurement is from the surface of the earth. So you can measure the oil water contact if you have the data for it. So if you have any question, you can ask. If there's no question, we have actually done a lot for today. So tomorrow we have done what we can do for material balance. Tomorrow we will be looking at other aspects. Because if I come under option, not option tools, we don't have only material balance there. We have Monte Carlo, we have decline curve analysis, we have 1D modeling. we will do this 1D modeling tomorrow. So if there's any question, you can ask. If there's no question, then you can go through the video and you see how you can do some exercises. William, is there a question? So you realize that when we actually created our model, that's our model that has been created there. We can always, I don't know, let's see, we can add, voila, you can add another well to it, another well model to it. Maybe you have about 2 or 3 wells that are producing from the same reservoir. So if I actually input all of this and I take down, you realize that this well is connected to the same tank. That means it's connected to the same reservoir. So you may have a situation where about 2 or 3 wells are producing from the same reservoir. They are producing from the same reservoir. You want to predict their performance. And you may also have a situation where you have one well that is producing from multiple reservoirs. So we are talking about multi-layer analysis. That means in a given well, we have different reservoir horizons where we have hydrocarbon accumulation there, and the company is actually producing from all of these horizons at the same time.